But without further ado, welcome, and welcome to Northern Illinois University. I have the absolute honor of introducing our speaker for the evening, Dr. Temple Grandin. Some might know her for her contributions to animal agriculture and the humane treatment of cattle. Some might know her as the inspiration for the award-winning HBO film. And some might know her for her contributions and activism for autism awareness. There is no shortage for things we might know Temple Grandin's name from. Tonight, she will share her insider perspective of her experience with autism. Dr. Grandin chooses to view her autism as a part of who she is rather than a diagnosis, and she has worked diligently to enlighten the masses and to create an environment that supports all kinds of minds. On behalf of the entire Graduate Colloquium Committee, I would like to thank the School of Allied Health and Communicative Disorders and the Graduate School for sponsoring this wonderful evening. And I would also like to thank the staff and administrators in the Home Student Center and the College of Health and Human Sciences for their support in advertising and coordinating this event. And without further ado, please help me in welcoming Dr. Temple Grandin. I was waiting for you.
You can have this. I'll take this. Okay, all right. Now we got something that works. I should have just insisted on the handheld because they seem to be more reliable. Okay, let's just start out and talk a little about autism. It's a very, very big spectrum. It goes all the way to someone like Einstein or Tesla, to somebody that can't dress themselves. Now, over at the book table, I was a little bit disappointed we didn't get any engineers out of the engineering department over here. Because you got lots of guys on the spectrum over there. And wouldn't even have a computer here. We didn't have people on the spectrum. You see a little bit of autism. You know, a little less social, then you got geek circuits to make computers. Also to do stuff with art. Then you can get much more severe autism and they're nonverbal, and some nonverbal people can actually learn to type, and then you've got some that it's very, very severe, and it's all got the same label. It's not precise. You know, for me, being a college professor comes first, and all my work with cattle. Autism is an important part of who I am, and I wouldn't want to change because I can't stand the illogical way that most people are. It's just terrible. And I want to see kids get out and be successful. I've made it a point in my talks to go back and forth between the silos. Like last night, I did a fabulous FFA talk with about 600 FFA students. You need to make sure you keep FFA. You keep it. I've worked on every one of the major meat companies. And I worked with a lot of welding people and skilled millwright people that were dyslexic, ADHD, maybe mildly autistic, saved by that welding class. You know, a lot of people stick their nose up at skilled trades. Those jobs are going to be here in the future, and they're not getting replaced by AI. I am watching the job market really carefully. What do I do on planes? I read. In every business magazine there is, I read. And I'll be telling you a little bit more about AI later. Okay, I was a terrible student. And I get asked all the time, how did I get motivated? I got motivated when studying became the way to a goal of becoming a scientist. Education needs to be a way to a goal. And when I was in high school, my science teacher got me turned around, got me studying. You know, I also have to admit that I got kicked out of 9th grade for fighting. And I used a book as a weapon. A social studies book, a really big one. And then I chucked it across the music room and beamed her on the head because she called me a retard. And I was kicked out of 9th grade for that out of a regular high school. So I ended up going to a special school for kids with problems, boarding school. And for the first 3 years, I ran their horse barn. I didn't do any study. But I had to go to classes. I wasn't allowed to become a recluse in my room. But you know what I learned running that horse barn? I learned how to work. And one of the biggest problems I am finding with a lot of students today, they'll get the academics done, and then they end up in the basement playing video games because they haven't learned how to work. I'm seeing two trajectories with smart, fully verbal kids. The ones that get 2 summer jobs under that belt, volunteer jobs starting at age 11, learn how to work, do great. And the ones that are not learning how to work, ending up in the basement playing video games. Another thing I'm finding is I'm finding all these granddads and older parents coming up to me that find out they were on the spectrum when their kids get diagnosed. And they're in decent jobs. Now, I think sometimes the spectrum that holds you back on a job, where it's helpful is on relationships. That is where it's helpful. And then you understand why you don't kind of do it very well socially. You see, now studying was a path to a goal. And that was Mr. Carlock, my science teacher. But he actually came a little bit later on in my high school career. And he gave me interesting projects to do. And now studying became a way to becoming a scientist. And I get asked all the time how to end up in the cattle industry. I was exposed to cattle when I was a teenager. Now, I notice here at some of the schools I've gone to, you've got theater here and you've got music. One of the worst things schools have done has been taking out all the hands-on classes. Cooking, sewing, woodworking, art, auto shop. There's going to be lots of jobs there. Welding. All of those hands-on things. Because these hands-on things also teach practical problem solving. Okay, yes, I already talked about just talked to a dad tonight, found out that he was on the spectrum in a successful, good career. What would happen to some of our top innovators in today's educational system? Many top innovators had an unconventional educational path. If they'd been born today, would they be in the basement playing video games? Jane Goodall had a 2-year associate's degree in secretarial science when she did her famous study. That's all her parents could afford to do, get a secretarial degree. She got hired to be a secretary. Well, once she got out there where there was chimpanzees, the rest was history. And how about Thomas Edison? He was labeled an addled, hyperactive high school dropout. How about Tesla, the inventor of the power plant? Another one would be Edison. Edison was really, he was weird. And then Steven Spielberg, he was a lousy student. You know, C as in Charlie, rejected from a top film school. And every time I go behind the FedEx truck and I'm going, I am following the C term paper. Got a C in business school for the FedEx concept. I was bullied in school. A lot of these other people were bullied in school. Steve Jobs was bullied in school. Another person that's really interesting, Elon Musk, bullied in school. Well, now he's doing SpaceX. They're hiring right now. Well, I wonder how many people are on the spectrum down there. I'll tell you what they like for jobs. They don't like single-minded majors. They like computer science, electrical engineering, and mechanical, all mixed together, maybe put a dash of physics in there too. They like these majors where it's not so narrow. I had a couple of students come up to me today. They wanted to be elementary school teachers, and they really liked English. I said, why don't you take an English literature survey course so you know some things about Shakespeare and stuff that you can tell your students that makes it interesting. A lot of majors get way, way, way too narrow. Education's one of them. Yeah, let's take some other classes, biology, history, literature classes, and not get into such narrowness. Some humanities majors, way too narrow. No, we got to get out of the silos. Yes, I don't know, we should have done more communication with the engineering department. All right, I like cool stuff. I like space stuff. There's the Dragon spaceship docking with the space station. You know what its real name is? Puff the Magic Dragon. That's not very professional to call it that. And I had a chance to go down to Cape Kennedy. I was the disabilities people wanted me down there, and I was kind of annoyed that they had just put in the disability part and not anything about all the design work I had done with cattle. Well, I managed to get the total geek out tour. In the vehicle assembly building, on top of the vehicle assembly building, got to watch a SpaceX launch. I can tell you that's very different than watching it on TV. And I found out that there was a lot of labels there. How about Mr. Tourette's building the Mars launching platform? So what would you rather be? Be defined by Tourette's or Mars launch platform? As I walked under the American flag and the big thing that said the future that starts here, yeah, cool. Another guy, rotten student, dyslexic, top of the SATs in math. Since he's not declared publicly, I can't say what he does, but he designs extremely important stuff there. This is what bothers me. I don't want to see a label holding back your career. That's something I don't want to see. Yeah, no, Mr. Tourette's, no, he just has eye twitches. I know lots of people that have Tourette's. You get rid of the tics. You turn them into eye twitches. You can't get rid of the tics totally, but the verbal tics have got to go. Turn them into eye twitches. There I am in the mission control at Houston. I have to say, I really am a NASA geek. When I was a kid, I worshiped the astronauts. But one of the things I learned when I went and visited this stuff, that when we went to the moon, one of the finest things we ever did, we did it with real primitive stuff. I'll tell you a little secret about the moon spacesuit. There's a great book about it. It was made by Playtex. I am not kidding. The finest brass seamstresses sewed it. Yeah, the guys wanted a hard suit, but it was too heavy to put in the limb. Yeah, and they had to rename Playtex subsidiary some fancy engineering name. Now the later suits, no, they're hard. The torso part's hard, but the moon suit was, hand sewn. You don't realize how low tech some of this stuff is. And the thing is, the whole country got behind it. And I stood in front of the vehicle assembly building and I just started crying. And I'm going, why was it so special what we did here? We built the Saturn V here. We did something really hard. Not because it was easy, but because it was hard. I really loved Kennedy's speech about that. And everyone worked together and we did it. And the thing is, you know what I thought of? The right stuff rode the rocket. But the geeks and the misfits and the kids that were different built the stuff. Well, and there's the space station mock-up in Houston. It's all apart in pieces in a warehouse, but I managed to photograph it so it looked like it was all together, because it's much cooler when it really looks like it's actually up in space. Okay, what are some common denominators of unique minds? Growing up with lots of books. Books were a very important part of our household. Mother read to us as little kids. I had trouble with learning how to read, and Mother taught me with phonics. Another kid may learn by whole word. Don't get hung up on just single-minded things. If you're working with little kids, slow down when you talk to them, enunciate your words. You also have to give the kid time to respond. They're like a slow computer. They're like a phone on one bar. You've got to give their brain time to load that web page. That's what you got to do. Give them time to respond. And always encourage them to use their words. Little kids have to be taught turn-taking. That was really pounded into me. You've got to take turns. And then there's sensory issues. Sometimes a sound that bothers a kid is better tolerated if the kid can control it. One mom said her kid was terrified of the vacuum cleaner, so she let him play with the vacuum cleaner. And since he could control it, he got to be able to tolerate it better. Yeah, make it so the kid can control the sound. But a lot of these individuals, early exposure to career interests, hands-on, learn to work, not over-specialized, and they had mentors. And I had some very good mentors. And I recommend that any student get out there and do career-related internships. Make sure OT or counseling, whatever it is the career you really want to be in. Arts foster scientific success. A Nobel Prize winner in science was 50% more likely to have an arts and crafts hobby compared to another scientist. Maybe painting, musician, actor. Now let's talk about cross-discipline. There's a wonderful lady out in Colorado, and her name is Camille King. And she noticed in her dog behavior business that sometimes the dogs would turn gray prematurely. And there's a statistician here, and I'm terrible on names. His first name is Tom. But we got to make sure Tom gets credit. He's here at this university. He was a statistician on this paper. And I'm terrible about names because I don't visualize them. And he was a statistician, she was a behaviorist, and I worked on developing the assessment tool for gray dog snouts Some of these dogs, home alone, tear the house down, scratching everything up, jumping, very impulsive. They're turning gray prematurely. Camille, really hard worker. But you see, you need different kinds of minds working on things. Yes, and Northern Illinois University was involved in it. Okay, we need to be keeping these classes. Okay, theater. I was very pleased to see that the high school had a stage equipped with some theater equipment. Theater's a great career. It's not going to go away. People are still going to want theater. They're going to want live music. These are things that in the future artificial intelligence is not going to replace. There's other careers it will replace. Bullied in school, but Steve Jobs had calligraphy for his hobby. Einstein, no speech until age 3, and he played the violin. A lot of kids are getting labels, and I'm getting worried about them getting screened out. I was reading an article on education the other day, and somebody said we need to be looking at what's a kid doing 10 years after high school. Well, the first thing I want to do is get them learning how to work before they graduate. I want to get rid of transition after high school. Learn how to work before you graduate. It's one of the things I want to do. But I want to get them out in a career they're going to like. Yes, and there's certain things I don't want to see happen, really bad things. But then I want to have them go out and get a lot higher than that. And I worked for years in the construction industry. I'm going to be talking about that on my cattle things. And construction's all about outcomes, about finishing a job, making a job work. I'm finding with the autistic kids, we're doing a good job with our little ones. Where we're falling down is on the teenagers. That's where we tend to be falling down. Dyslexics, a lot of dyslexics, if they get a chance to go into business, they do just great. JetBlue, the founder had ADHD. I went on JetBlue the other day, even in the back of the plane, you still had leg room. Couldn't believe it. I had United Economy Plus in the back of the plane, and I didn't have somebody else's seat jamming through me. And then the guy, IKEA, ADHD and dyslexia. Business is something where there's no academic barrier of entry, but you're going to have to learn how to read and write decently. That's something you're going to have to do. Okay, this is the head of Goldman Sachs, horrible dyslexic student. And one of the things he said is knowing where you want to end up is easier than figuring out where to start. What is the goal? I've really been thinking about that, and I had a lady tell me about how she was very severe anorectic when she was in college, and she was darn near dead, and she showed me pictures of herself on her phone. You know what got her over it? She wanted a dream job that she was offered. Because they liked her resume, she got over it, because now there was a reason to get over it. Okay, a lot of creative people do not go on a conventional educational path. They also don't over-specialize. I'm seeing some humanities majors out there. This over-specialize is ridiculous. Pure mathematician, nobody wants that. You want to take stuff that people want. The other thing is job boards. You know how easy it was to find out where the SpaceX jobs were? I typed SpaceX jobs into Google. Then, coming out here from the airport, went by some great big white factory with a weird name on it, like Payden. I don't remember the name. Type the name in. They make all these fasteners for cables and wiring up buildings for computers, and they're hiring. People don't even bother to look things up on the phone. The other thing we got to be doing is finding back doors. I'll be talking more later about learning how to sell my work. This is a super important slide. I am a photorealistic visual thinker. Everything I think about is a picture. That's why I don't remember some of the names. I actually see the big white factory. I can see the sign on the corner of the building, and I can't remember what it says. It's frustrating. You see, because the name didn't remind me of anything to do with a picture. Couldn't do algebra. I'm worried that all this emphasis on algebra is screening a lot of students out. Why can't they take geometry instead? So how did I manage to get through school without algebra? I got out of it. And it was pure luck. In 66 and 67, when I went to college, the educational fad of the time was finite math, probability and statistics. That was what we did. That saved me. Now, another kind of mind is the pattern thinker. This is your mathematician. They think in patterns. Think organic chemistry. Think computer programming. And often these kids have trouble with reading. But we need both kinds of minds. Visual thinkers need to be designing safety systems, because Fukushima nuclear power plant disaster was the most colossal visual thinking mistake you could ever have. It's not a very good idea when you live next to the sea to put super important emergency cooling pump with an electric motor in a non-waterproof basement. I am not kidding. It just doesn't work very well. Absolute disaster. Then you have the kid who's the verbal facts guy, who knows history. They'd be good at retail sales. They'd also might be a good history teacher. Okay, you have a third grader who's good at math, then let him do college math if he can do it. You have a kid that's good at art, have him do art. You want to take the thing and fixate it on and broaden it out. Don't let him do it so fixated. When I was in third grade, I wanted to draw horse heads all the time. Mother got me drawing a whole lot of other things. Another little tip I want to give you that's a problem is I have no working memory. I cannot remember sequences of information. So if a kid has to do a task, like take apart an ice cream machine, clean it, put it back together again, pilot's checklist. Step 1, step 2, step 3, just little bullet points. You don't have to write out the whole directions. You just give them bullet points to jog the memory. That gets around the working memory problem. Really super simple thing to do. So then you don't have the employer going, well, I already showed him how to fix that machine 5 times. Is he stupid? Yeah, you give him a pilot's checklist. Okay, Thomas Edison just said, I'm not a mathematician, but I can also always hire mathematicians, but they can't hire me. And in my book, The Autistic Brain, I talk about different ways that people think. Yes, there's science behind that. You want evidence-based? There is some evidence-based on this. Okay, well, I'm talking about evidence-based. Some people find that if you go and adjust the colored background on the computer, the print will stop shaking. Some of these kids, they see the print shaking. Try lavender, try light blue, try printing the homework on different colored papers. And somebody might say to me, well, that's not evidence-based. And I go, if it's cheap, totally safe, and takes me 15 minutes to try it, I'm going to try a lot of different things. If something's expensive, dangerous, and takes 6 months to even try it, yeah, then I got to have a lot of evidence-based. I'm talking about colored paper. I know several students where tan paper or lavender paper in the printer saved their college career. I'm worried that our visual thinkers are getting screened out with some of the strict algebra requirements. Think it's just ridiculous. Let them take geometry. I'm not suggesting no math. I'm not suggesting that. But I think there's some pattern thinkers that think you got to have algebra in order to think. It didn't make any sense to me. There's no pictures. We need visual thinkers in science. One of the big problems we've got in science right now is problems with reproducing scientific experiments. And it has to do with how the methods are described. This brings up another thing I have when we're trying to figure out problems with kids. People overgeneralize. A detail, such as whether you vigorously stirred cancer cells or you just gently kind of rocked them, can change the results of a cancer study. When people are trying to figure out what to do with a kid, they overgeneralize. They go, what do I do with an autistic kid? Well, I don't know. How old is he? Can he read? What's his problem? I don't know enough about him. And I see the same thing in dog behavior problems. They'll go, what do I do with my crazy dog? Well, I don't know. Is he crazy nasty, crazy happy? I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what this dog's doing. You see, when you think in words, you tend to overgeneralize. You think sensory, then you don't overgeneralize. Because I'm seeing very specific things. And I always have to get people to ask more questions. There's different ways to teach math. Try different ways. Try what works. There are some really great little origami things that kids have made. Now, when you ask me to think about a church steeple, I see specific ones. See, my concept of what a church steeple is made out of specific examples, pictures of specific examples. And if I see lots and lots of different churches, I can categorize them. New England type, cathedrals, famous cathedrals. But when I asked a speech therapist about this, he just saw a pointy thing, just a very vague pointy thing. And then when you asked the mathematician, he saw a motion of people singing and praying. Getting back to the iPhone, Steve Jobs was an artist. That's why your phone's easy to use. And what I've done with a lot of my cattle work is the field of industrial design, the artist side of engineering. Then the engineers had to make the phone work. You need to have both kinds of thinkers, because the engineers get the phone so complicated nobody can figure out how to work it. I just got the new iPhone 6. Love the camera. I love the camera to pieces. I couldn't believe the SpaceX launch pictures I got. But it does stupid things, like giving me last week's messages. I don't know why it does that. You know, the other iPhone 6 I had never did that. And then, of course, they've designed the USB port to break in 2 years. I've had that happen on 2 phones. And I've been careful with it. I put a super strong contractor case on it so it can take some diggers without breaking. You get too over-specialized. You're not going to do good. You need to not be over-specialized. A top researcher in plant science told me that some of his highly specialized graduate students didn't have any creativity. I love this from the science fiction writer Isaac Asimov. A degree is the first step down a ruinous highway. You don't want to waste it, so you go into doctoral research, and you end up being a thoroughgoing ignoramus on everything in the world except for one subdivisional sliver of nothing. No, and in education, let's take, maybe some educators ought to take an engineering class. Take something, where you've got something other than educational theory to pass on to your kids. Education is very, very top-down and theoretical. They'll talk about, what do I do about an inclusive classroom? Well, I don't know. You see, the way I'm going to tackle that problem is one specific example at a time. Okay, this kid was successful. This kid wasn't successful. What can you do to, accommodate different kids? I'm thinking back to my own elementary school. We had a girl that had a heart condition and she couldn't run, so we made her goalie in soccer. Okay, that's an example of a successful, inclusive classroom. But sometimes it's thought about way too top-down, way too theoretical. Oh, people vaguely say, what do we do about, society, discriminates this and that. Well, I think it's just like my business and livestock handling. I started designing one project at a time. And then you get word of mouth, you design another project. Then I wrote about it specifically, how this project worked on that farm. Again, specific examples forming concepts. Artificial intelligence, I just found out a year ago, works exactly like how my mind works. That's why I get along with search engines really well. Because after all, they were made by the autistic brain. And where artificial intelligence really works is on highly specialized tasks. I wouldn't spend 8 years going to school to study radiology, oncology, or endocrinology. Those medical specialties will get replaced with a computer. Right there, that iPhone can diagnose skin cancer. So how do you teach the phone? You teach it by giving it specific examples. 2,000 pictures of melanomas, verified melanomas. 2,000 pictures of my ugly age spots, mosquito bites, and rashes. And then from that, it can look at a new picture and it can categorize. Now, bottom-up thinking is the same way that I think. That's why you got to get these kids out doing things. I'm seeing too many parents that overprotect, where the kid hasn't even learned shopping. Now, on the other hand, we don't throw them in the deep end of the pool. You got to stretch these kids just outside the comfort zone. I'll tell you something that doesn't work. We take an 18-year-old girl, really anxious, never had a job, and we shove her in a busy clothing store at Christmas rush. That we don't do. We put them in the clothing store not during the Christmas rush. You don't chuck them in the deep end of the pool. No, you gradually got to get them into things. But I'm seeing parents that can't let go. And almost being a special ed mom has become part of their identity. I had one mom cry when I suggested that her 13-year-old, who had never shopped, should buy some printer paper. That's all I suggested that he should do. Ultimate bottom-up thinking. This is a company in Boston. We're not making any hypotheses up front. We're using the patient-derived data to generate the hypothesis. You see, that's bottom-up. Education, super top-down, super verbal. I don't know. Some of the stuff, I don't know. I've looked at some of the ed course stuff. I'd rather just have you take the minimum amount of ed classes and fill up your majors with good stuff like theater, English literature, maybe some sciences, some computer programming, so you got substance to pass on to these students. Yes, there's some classes you need to have, but I'm not very big on too much theory stuff, because you know what? Half of the time it's wrong. I will never forget when I was in college in the late 60s, the teaching machine fad. Man, it was just ridiculous. Those were the worst books. Look that stuff up. It was just garbage. That was the rage when I was in college. Visual thinkers, AI, some people with autism, ADHD or dyslexia, all bottom-up thinkers. But the thing about bottom-up thinking is it takes a huge amount of data. They had to train that program with 2,000 melanomas. Not 200, 2,000. And this is the way my mind is. People have said to me my talks are better at 50 than they were at age 40. You see, as you fill up the database, that's why you've got the kids get them out doing things. Concepts are formed with specific examples. Then you can start sorting. That, like, for example, dogs. You can sort them by size. I could sort them by color. I could sort them by kind of their disposition. There's a lot of different things I can sort dogs. Also, I'm a sensory-based learner, not word-based. And this really helped me in my work with animal behavior. And my very first work that I did, I was really interested in optical illusions. So here's an example where I was a psych major originally, started in optical illusions, and when I switched over to cattle, it seemed obvious to me to look at what the cattle were seeing. And other people didn't notice that in the 70s. And I tend to see things other people don't see. Like we had a 95% eclipse at Colorado State University. Here are eclipse shadows. I didn't know eclipses made these weird shadows, but I noticed these shadows. And I watched 50 other students walk over them. The other thing that horrified me was only about 20% of the students were interested. I think that's a real shame. Our school gave out 30,000 pairs of glasses. I mean, our school really, yeah, they managed to spell science wrong on them, but they really wanted to work hard on getting the kids interested in it. We had about 20% that were interested. It happened right when classes were changing. And they're just walking around oblivious, walking right over this sidewalk, right smack in front of our library in the middle of campus. I think that's kind of sad. I think we need to be getting kids back involved with the real world. Well, I noticed the cattle would balk at a little chain. They wouldn't walk through a little chain. Why do I have to keep talking about this? Because people aren't taking them out. I give them checklists, coats on fences. Get those distractions out of your facility. Here's one where there's a reflection on the floor. You know, they're not afraid of getting slaughtered. They're afraid of the dark, and they're afraid of seeing stuff up ahead. And you get rid of that stuff, they'll walk right in. I had a great time in Ireland this summer. You want something really cool. You get picked up at the Dublin airport, and then you go to the place where they have the black executive helicopter. Very impressive. You get in this big fancy helicopter, and we fly over to this beef plant, and we land on its front lawn, and I go in there, and their cattle refuse to go up the chute. And they'd stop. And I noticed there was holes in the sidewall, and they could see motion through the holes. 6 pieces of duct tape later. And it worked. Oh, by the way, you know, I found something really weird back here. I found a whole big bunch of duct tape. I couldn't believe it. I just had to, you know, get this, the duct tape ball. Maybe somebody might like to have that. Big ball of duct tape. Maybe somebody would like to have that. Well, I think it's pretty funny to go in there in the black executive helicopter, and all I did was put 6 pieces of tape on something. But it fixed it. Because for the cattle, it's all about what they see. Non-slip flooring is really important for animals. They panic when they slip. All right, let's see how good you are at visual thinking. Raise your hand if you saw that animal was looking at the sunbeam. We're doing a bit better. But you know who does the best at this? Elementary school children. They do the best. Now, I get really choked up about things like some of NASA's exploration projects. Why do I get so emotional about that? Because it's pure going out and observing. Observation is part of science. You can't form a hypothesis until you've observed. And that really turns me on. Here's a guy that turns me on. 81 years old. He's still manning mission control for the Voyager spacecraft. It has left the solar system. He's been kicked out of NASA. Mission control is in a storefront next to the puppy training place and a McDonald's. But we're going to find out why we're a Class M planet that can support life from Ed Stone. Well, that's dedication. And the signal's so weak, they got to use 3 giant radio telescopes. Yeah, where are they getting the budget for that? Well, I don't know. They're Asperger's. They're figuring out some way to get the budget for it. But I get really emotional about this urge to explore, to go out and find new knowledge. I mean, it just turns me on. I read about him in the New York Times Magazine, and I cried for the whole entire flight to the point where it was embarrassing. All right, let's teach kids how to work. Walking the neighbor's dog at age 11. And I had a parent say to me, we don't have a program for that. I go, really? The reason why I'm asking you telling you to set it up to walk the neighbor's dog is it doesn't require a program. And then the parents would go, well, we have a dog. I said, the point is, I want it to be somebody else's dog. You got to start doing a task on a schedule outside the home. Selling cookies, running yard sales. Okay, I went to this education meeting, and they had some workshops I thought really were pretty silly. But they had a little thing of like basic values for the school. Okay, working on health. Okay, I'm very happy that the school I went to this morning, they got rid of all the sugared drinks in the vending machine. That was one of the first things I thought of. But that's something specific. I'm not going to get rid of the bake sale. That's only twice a year. They're going to cook all the stuff. But you see, I'm starting to think specific. Yard sales, volunteer at church jobs, volunteer at a retirement home, and then get real jobs when you're 16, and figure out how to get in those back doors. Yeah, short circuit the interview process. Here's my jobs. Mother got me a sewing job at age 13, working for a freelance seamstress. Then when I started my livestock business, it was freelance, one job at a time. When I went to the special boarding school, cleaning horse stalls, I ran their horse barn. Roofing at age 16, man, it was fun. That's probably illegal today. Man, it was fun, though. Great shingle throwing contests. Painting signs and selling them. First sign I ever painted was for a beauty shop. I had to make a sign a beauty shop would want. Carpentry work, college internships. I had to rent a house with another person. This stuff was just set up in the neighborhood. I was doing internships before colleges had internships. Now there's all kinds of internships, and you need to be doing them. I did lots of carpentry. I took an ugly building, and I made it nice. You got to learn how to do stuff other people would want. Here I am painting signs for ridiculous carnival rides. So how did I get that job? I showed a portfolio of my signs to a sign painter. You learn to sell your work, not yourself. And there's my sign painting truck. One of the things that often comes up is driving. And if I hadn't known how to drive, I wouldn't have been able to do the cattle business. It's that simple. It's going to take longer. In my aunt's ranch, it was 3 miles up to the mailbox, 3 miles back. That's 20 minutes every day. For the whole summer, it was 200 miles. So I did a tank of gas in a safe place before we did any traffic. That's a 20-minute lesson every day. The brain doesn't like marathons. Do a 20-minute lesson every day, back country roads, back places. Then we do driver's ed. Driver's ed chucks them into it way too quickly. To deal with some of the multitasking issues, they've got to learn how to drive that car on autopilot, where that motor skill is learned before we do any traffic. And after I got my license, I went for a year before I did any freeways. You work into it slowly, but we've got to do it. Favorite classes. I already loved my English literature class, experimental psychology, building things. I had the old-fashioned liberal arts education when you took 2 science classes, you took a history class, English class. You know, you got really exposed to a whole lot of different things. High school mentors. I had my science teacher. I had Ann out at the ranch. Also, as a little kid, we had a fabulous 3rd grade teacher. She ran the elementary school. And I had very good early intervention. That I had. But where we're falling down is with these older kids. What would happen to me today? No speech when I was little? Yeah, we're doing well on dealing with that. I'd be a prime candidate for video game addiction. We have got to control the video game playing. It's 1 hour a day. I was allowed to have an hour a day of television. That's all. And we need to be getting lots of hands-on learning experiences, work experience, and don't allow yourself to become your label. No, the college professor comes first. And I make sure when autism talks would totally take over. No, I'm not going to let them take over. I love talking to the FFA kids. Let me tell you, I found about 10 kids I'm positive are on the spectrum. I'm probably not diagnosed. But I can tell just by the way they talk and stuff, probably on, autistic. Here's a scientist's reaction to taking out hands-on lab classes. Practical experiments teach the reality of science with all its frustrations and rewards. Things don't always work. Well, I talked to a lady about 6 months ago who ran a horse stable, and she had to teach 4 or 5 teenagers how to hook up a garden hose. I am not kidding. Home Depot has a video on how to use a tape measure because that was a top search term on their website. Really? Yeah, you might know algebra, but I've been in a college where I was teaching college students how to find the area of a circle. They didn't know how to do that. I like to show off some brain scans because I like to explore inner space when new equipment becomes available. Now, it's a lot of fun doing this on the fanciest new equipment, but you don't need to do it because the abilities show up in the classroom. I got a big visual thinking circuit, but my art ability starts showing up around 3rd grade, or the math ability might start showing up. Big visual thinking circuit there. This is all written up in my autistic brain book. Okay, you've got a little place right here. I don't know if the arrow will show up on the screen back here or not. Yeah, it does. Okay, that's the trashed out working memory. The algebra department's wrecked. I got no working memory. So that's a place where you got to do a workaround, like with the pilot's checklist. But algebra had nothing to visualize. At least in finite math, I could visualize some of the statistical stuff. Okay, meat industry had no academic barrier to entry. Managed to get out of algebra class. This is something where you just got to figure out how to do it. So what do you do if you graduate and you don't have a high school degree? If your portfolio is good enough, it won't matter. I just saw a portfolio tonight. Beautiful artwork a girl did. Beautiful, professional grade art. But it was not presented professionally. It was in a little ring binder book. I said, you get those pictures scanned before they get dirty. Then you put them on a tablet so you can have a really nice professional thing to present. And they won't care about whether you know algebra or not. But then you're going to have to crank out some artwork other people want. And I suggested that she take a class in how to start a business. Let's look at the business school, what they got here. Class in entrepreneurship. How do you start a business? How do you operate a freelance business? That's what I do. You see, because I want her to do something with that art. And how did I get into college? With horrible SAT scores? Mother bashed open the back door of a brand new little 2-year college. And I had decided to work, and thank goodness it was finite math. I came from an educated family. Art ability was nurtured. Mother read to us. My 2 favorite books in elementary school, Famous Inventors. And this spring we're coming out with a new book called Calling All Minds. It's going to be have some of my projects I made as a kid, bird kites, helicopters. It's going to have a lot of stories about famous inventors because I want to get kids turned on. And then, of course, Black Beauty. Those 2 books are my favorite books. Early exposure to career interests. Yeah, that's another really important thing. Students get interested in stuff they get exposed to. It's that simple. And when you're weird, you got to sell the client by showing off your work. This is the drawing right here. It's a little distorted right here that I showed to Bill Fielding, the head of Cargill, in the late 80s. And I have designed the stockyards and the concrete work for all the Cargill plants in North America, for Cargill beef plants. And I did it strictly by showing my portfolio. He got a big fold-out drawing. He got this brochure, he got a couple of articles, and plastic pages of pictures. One of the mistakes that people make is put too much junk in the portfolio. No, what you want is a 30-second wow aimed at the client. Like, for example, if I want to sell meat plants, I don't show them ranch stuff. When I want to sell ranches, I show them ranch stuff. And if I'm going to sell car ads and bank ads, then I don't show them weird science fiction art. I can't believe some of the ads that are appearing with really important international news. Okay, I'm scrolling through really important international stuff. Okay, we got sofas, ladies' dresses, and other things. Yeah, I don't know. I think artificial intelligence needs to do a better job on that. And here's an aerial photo of the first dip vat that I ever designed, and I put it in my portfolio. Show them this stuff. People thought it was weird, but when I showed them examples of my work, then they kind of go, oh, you're weird, but you've been designing some good things. There's the dip vat system they built for the movie. They're starting my career in construction. And this really affects how I think. Our purpose as educators is to get kids out there and get them to be successful. And when I've done a lot of work on animal welfare requirements, well, the first thing I tell all the animal welfare people in supply chain management, you can't get away from this. Yeah, don't be doing stuff that you don't want shown on a phone, nasty things. That's the first thing. You got to just prevent the bad stuff. And then I've developed very simple scoring systems for meat plants where I'm measuring how they perform rather than telling them how to build stuff. And when I was young, I used to think I could fix everything with engineering. If I could just build the perfect equipment. It doesn't work that way. The same mistake's been made in schools. Oh, get the perfect computers in the school, perfect this and that. It's going to fix the schools that didn't. And some of the educators I talked to Monday were a little bit surprised when I said, what would I rather have? Would I rather have adequate equipment with superb teaching or have state-of-the-art with maybe poor, with not so good teaching? I'll take the adequate with superb teaching. And then that's what I would take. Now, there's a few things we got to have. Really hot classrooms, been there, done that? No. I don't, that's not adequate because you're so hot you can't stand it. And there's one of my systems built in the plant, just completed this summer. And I'd just like to show that to the people that think, well, yeah, college is great, but a lot of this wasn't built with a college degree. And you're talking about some complicated stuff here. Stupid people don't do this kind of metal work. These jobs, not going to go away. And there's a drawing of my dip vat system. I always like to show my drawings off. And I noticed an interesting thing. When the industry went from hand drawing to computers, we sometimes would get a drawing done by a kid who had the 2-year course, who had never built anything and never worked with his hands. And they made weird mistakes on drawings because they weren't seeing them. And the people that had built things and drew by hand drew good drawings. Then I go out and I visited Pixar, and they told me that sometimes they got to get them off the computers in order to get them to draw right. Then I went over to another animation company, and they were printing out with the 3D printer the different cartoon characters, and then putting them on the mouse pad where they could touch them. Okay, there's the cattle coming up the lead up. So also put in these kinds of pictures just to show them, really cool looking stuff. 30-second, wow. All right, I think what we want to do right now, hopefully they've got a mic that they can pass around. I've got to make sure I don't push this lectern off the stage. Does have a little thing there to prevent it. See, somebody put a little thing there, a little angle iron, because I think that happened before. Okay, I'll take a question from somebody just up here in the front, and I'll repeat it. Okay, right there? Okay, the question is, what do I think of higher educational systems teaching general education courses? That's vague. I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. What do you mean by that? Well, I think a teacher's going to have some foundation stuff.
Yes, but what if you've taken it in, we're taking this in high school, and I think we're the only country who does that.
Does what now?
Teaches general education in higher education systems.
When you say, in other words, in higher education, it means teaching like basic mathematics. Sometimes you're rehashing the same math class.
Precisely.
Yeah, that's not a smart thing to do. You know, like chemistry class may be very similar to the chemistry class you had in high school. That's actually kind of a stupid waste of time. Because sometimes it's the same class.
Oh, absolutely.
But then, once you get through the general ed stuff, then some of the stuff for education, in some majors, gets really narrow. Yes, if SpaceX needs people who can do mathematics, but they have no use for a pure mathematician. Yeah, you want the math in there, but they want the engineering mixed up with the computer science and electrical and mechanical all mixed together. That's what they need.
I've had that too. Oh, sorry.
Okay?
I've actually had that problem too. Like in my high school, I found that I was taking good classes, but then it's like I go into college, and unfortunately, they're teaching me the same things I learned
Well,
in high school.
that's something's just stupid.
I already
mean,
knew how to write emails.
You know, and
and they
there's
taught me that
certain
in
classes
college.
where you could test out, especially in something like chemistry.
Yeah.
Now, I have a class in livestock handling, and we're not going to let them test out of that because that's got, you know, totally new material.
Oh, yeah.
But something like a math class or a chemistry class, you already know it. To take the same class again is kind of dumb.
Yeah, that's what happened with English and Spanish. They taught me the same things I learned, and like they were in an honors English class, they were teaching me how to write an email. I knew how to do a professional business
Well,
email.
unfortunately, there are some kids that need to be taught how to write an email.
Oh, yes.
Because one of the problems that I've run into, you know, because I teach, is there are some college students and their writing skills are absolutely atrocious because nobody ever copy edited their work. You know, there's some students that are going to learn with diagramming sentences. That did not work for me. There's other students that are going to learn by just having their work red marked up. Some people don't think that's politically correct. Well, when you grow up and you become an author, Betsy, my editor, she just tore through all my stuff. And that happened to me when I was a grown-up. But I think we have to be looking a lot more as education as the path to a goal. And one of the things that all students need, it doesn't matter what field, you've got to be able to read and write at least at the 7th grade level decently. And that's USA Today. And you can run a Fortune 500 company if you can then do the old-fashioned up through 6th grade math the way it was taught in the 50s. You can run a Fortune 500 company. I can tell you, I've been in the boardrooms. Okay, but you do have to be able to read and write at that level. Okay, I think we'll take maybe 3 or 4 more questions, and then I'll be out to talk to people out at the book table, because I'm a shameless book promoter. Because I want to get information out there.
Hello.
Yep.
I was not really expecting to get the microphone, but I'm going to ask my questions. First, I got here a little late, so I was wondering if you could sign my book.
Wondering what?
I got this book from my mom a few years ago. It's
Okay,
one of
did it help
yours.
you out? I hope it helped you out.
Okay.
Okay.
D- Second, I've just gotten into college last year, and I kind of...
I hope you're
It's-
doing well in college.
Thank you. I'm getting red. Anyway,
I'd recommend that you take career-relevant internships. This is something in every department where I've gone all around the country. Like in our department, in animal science, we have 50 different internships in just about every agribusiness thing that we've got in the West.
okay.
So students can get out there and try on careers. Then you go over to the engineering department, and I've talked to the engineering department about this. They're doing the same thing, getting their students out on construction sites, out all kinds of places, so they can try on jobs. Because you don't want to go into a career that you hate. And it's just as important to find out what you like as to find out what you don't like.
Thank
You
you,
need-
and
You're going to have to ask it really quickly, and then I'm going to have to go on to somebody else.
the college I'm going to has foreign language as a requirement, and I'm kind of confused as to why I need to know a foreign language in order to graduate.
Well, I managed to, I got a D in French, so. but I managed to graduate second in my class, and I had to be tutored in French. It was my worst subject, and the only way I could learn a foreign language was by reading. I was just down in Chile, and they had an airline magazine that was in English and Spanish, and I'd have to take a dictionary and get to where I could read the Spanish part, and then I find I start to hear a word, like I go in the restaurant and I heard the words cafe caliente, meaning it was hot. But I have some auditory processing problems. And when people talk fast, then it goes into gibberish. That's why it's so important with the little kids. You got to slow down when you talk to them. But there's no way I could pick up a foreign language hearing it. I have to read first, and then I could start to pick the words out. Now, I wouldn't worry about the grammar. I'll get that later. I've just got to get nouns, verbs, position words, like up, down, in, on. Okay, I think I'll take somebody else. Okay, right here, and I'll just repeat it really quickly.
Why the arcs?
Well, cattle have a tendency to want to go back to where they come from. So if you lay out the crowd pen like this, as they go around the bend, they think they're going back to where they come from. There's kind of a tendency to circle around. And here's right here, they have a natural tendency to want to go back to where they come from. And I've just found that worked really well, especially with really wild cattle. We had a lot of wild cattle out in the West when I started. Okay? Okay, right there.
Out of curiosity, one of the hardest things in school is asking the professor or teacher why.
Asking a professor or teacher why you have to do something?
No, not why you have to do something. Why does it have to be that way?
Like what has to be what way?
When they're trying to teach you something, my brain goes into the mechanics of it. Like I'll be at a carnival and I'll just stop and apparently I disappear. And I'm looking at the mechanics of it.
Well, maybe you ought to be a repairman of carnival rides. They need people to fix them. You see, there's a lot of people that are really good visually with equipment, and they can't do algebra and some of the math, but there's a huge need for repairing equipment. You're the kind of guy that if Tyson hired you, put you to work in the maintenance shop, you could probably fix anything they had in there that was mechanical. And okay, now the thing is, you're again talking in generalities. You see, you got to realize as you're bottom-up thinker, I don't think in generalities. So, okay, you have to give me a specific example of the course and what the problem was with the teacher. Otherwise, I can't even answer it.
5th grade, Mr. Bastador.
Fifth grade, okay. Okay, you got a mic here? Okay, good.
He ended up figuring out that giving me the book to finish gave me an A. Staying with the class was keeping me behind. But if he was trying to teach you that these are the rules to algebra, geometry, whatever it is.
Algebra is a gigantic mystery to me. See, because the problem I have is if there's no picture, I don't see it. And if you're the kind of person that's visually very clever with machines, you need to skip algebra, go to geometry. I don't know why algebra is a prerequisite for geometry, because the Greeks invented it first. So,
but if you ask the teacher...
What I want to worry about right now, right now, let's worry about how you can get into a satisfying career. You really like to fix machines. Why don't you get a portfolio together, some stuff you fixed? You show that to the guys over at Tyson or some of those, they'll hire you instantly. You'll get a job. We've got a huge shortage of people that are good at fixing equipment. That's how I sold jobs, was by and there's abstract stuff. I mean, algebra doesn't make any sense to me. And the thing that saved my college career was an educational fad, and education is big on fads, along with the teaching machines, which were really ridiculous, was the finite math class, which in the 60s was statistics, probability, and matrices. Now they put computer programming in it. I was horrible at that. They didn't have computer programming in it when I took it. Okay, right there. It's an older last name in the family. Okay, that one was easy. Okay, I think we'll do two more and then we're going to end it. Okay, right here.
I went to your alma mater, Franklin Pierce College.
You went to Franklin Pierce?
Yes.
Great.
How did you like the school?
Well, I had some great teachers there. Mr. Burns, my biology teacher, was really good. Mrs. Betty Vandersloos. When I look back on that, I got a good education there. Lots of times at these smaller schools, a lot of students can get a better education doing their more general classes in two-year college, smaller classes. And Franklin Pierce had a lot of retirees that would come in and teach a single course there. And one of them was Tom Evans in animal behavior. And he was retired from a work he'd done at Harvard. And that's one of the things that got me interested in animal behavior. Tom Evans taught a wonderful animal behavior class, and he was a retired person. So I had some extremely good professors there.
Yeah, I went there in 77.
No, I went there, let's see, that would have been 66 through 70. That's when I was there. Okay, let's take a couple of questions. Okay, right over there. Okay, she's going to run over there with the mic, and then we're going to end up real quick. Okay, you look real anxious. Okay.
Trying to help her out. How and when would you talk to your child about that they have a diagnosis of autism?
How old is the child?
5.
He's what?
5.
He's 5? Well, if he's doing really well, he may not need to know. Is he doing really well? Is he getting along in school? This brings up another thing. The places where I had friends was where I had shared interests. The only places I was not bullied was horseback riding, model rockets, and electronics class. Classes with a shared interest. Well, is your 5-year-old getting along well in school now? And then one of the things that my 3rd grade teacher did, which was really good, is she explained to the other children that I had a handicap, but it wasn't visible like a wheelchair. And I think that was a really good way of putting it. But if he's doing just fine, maybe he can just kind of grow out of the diagnosis. Where it helps the most is on relationships, especially with teenagers and adults. On the milder kids, I don't think it's helping on the careers. I just had a parent come up to me tonight that found out they were on the spectrum, and they're in a good job. All right, one more question. Okay, right here. The question was, do I still use my squeeze machine? It broke about 7 years ago. I'm not using it anymore. I'm hugging real people now. And pressure helped calm down my anxiety. And anyone who's on the spectrum who's got a lot of anxiety, I recommend you get my book, Thinking in Pictures, where I describe successful use of antidepressant medication. But, yeah, didn't get around to fixing it. And I think, wait a minute, what did you want to ask me? Oh, yeah, they can buy it from the Therafin Corporation right here in Illinois, in Mokina, Illinois. It's kind of expensive. I do have the drawings up online. There's other things you can do for pressure. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for coming. I'll be out in the lobby, but I can't, I'm too old to jump off the stage, so I've got to go around here in the back.